When a TalkTV host calls a Labour MP sodding patronizing for suggesting women are naturally calm and good at not panicking, you know the interview's gone spectacularly off the rails. Welcome back to UK Political Insight, where Karl Turner MP went on Julia Hartley-Brewer's show to discuss the Andy Burnham blocking saga, and somehow ended up arguing that women should lead because his wife gives him good advice and doesn't overreact, at which point Julia absolutely destroyed him for the most patronizing view of women since the 1950s housewife stereotype. We're talking about an MP who thought women are naturally calm was a compelling leadership qualification, a presenter who responded by asking if women are also good at washing up, and a car crash interview that perfectly demonstrates why tokenistic arguments about gender and politics are insulting to everyone involved. This is political interview gold, and we're breaking down every excruciating second. So Karl Turner, Labour MP for Hull East, appeared on Julia Hartley-Brewer's TalkTV show to discuss Keir Starmer blocking Andy Burnham from the Gordon and Denton by-election. That's already a difficult topic for any Labour MP to defend, given the civil war it's triggered. But Turner decided the smart move was to pivot away from defending Starmer and instead say he'd prefer a woman leader because it's time the Labour Party had a woman, which sounds progressive until you dig into his reasoning, at which point it becomes a masterclass in how not to talk about gender and leadership. Julia asked him why, which is the most basic follow-up question imaginable. If you're going to say the Labour Party should have a woman leader, you should probably have a coherent reason ready that doesn't involve stereotypes. Turner's answer was that Labour's made excuses for too long. Fair enough, Labour's never had a woman leader despite being the supposedly progressive party, while even the Conservatives have had 2 female prime ministers. That's a legitimate criticism worth making. But Julia pressed further, asking not just why Labour should have a woman leader, but why a woman would be better. That's a harder question, because it requires articulating what women bring to leadership beyond just representation. And this is where Turner absolutely catastrophically face-planted. He stuttered and then said, "Well, because I think in my own personal relationship, my missus tends to be mild-mannered, doesn't panic, doesn't overreact, gives me advice." Let's just pause and appreciate how spectacularly wrong that answer is. Turner's justification for why women should lead the Labour Party is based on his personal relationship with his wife, who he describes as mild-mannered, non-panicky, and good at giving him advice. That's not a political argument. That's a man describing his spouse like she's a particularly helpful emotional support animal. It's reducing the question of women in leadership to, my wife is nice and calm, so all women must be naturally suited to leadership. The stereotype he's invoking, that women are naturally calm and level-headed while men are hot-headed and reactive, is both offensive and demonstrably nonsense. Plenty of male politicians are calm and analytical. Plenty of female politicians are passionate and confrontational. Reducing anyone to gender stereotypes rather than treating them as individuals with different personalities and leadership styles is exactly the kind of thinking that keeps women out of leadership in the first place. Julia, to her absolute credit, immediately called this out by asking, is that a strong trait in female politicians in the Labour Party? Which is politely saying, are you seriously basing your argument on stereotypes about your wife? Turner doubled down, saying women have got a tendency to calm things down and not panic, at which point Julia delivered the perfect response. Have you met Liz Truss? That's brilliant, because Liz Truss, whatever you think of her politics, was absolutely not calm and measured. Her entire premiership was chaos, panic, and catastrophically bad decisions made at speed. If Turner's argument is that women naturally bring calm to leadership, Liz Truss is the perfect counterexample. Julia is using a conservative woman to demolish Labour MP's sexist stereotyping, which is deliciously ironic. Turner confirmed he had met Liz Truss, at which point Julia exploded. She challenged his idea that all men are different, but most women have this calming tendency, asking if women would be better in jobs because of their gender. Turner stuttered, having realized he'd walked into a trap of his own making, and Julia continued with all due respect, it's a bit sodding patronizing. Women are a certain way. Are we good at washing up as well? That washing up line is absolutely savage because it takes Turner's logic to its natural conclusion. If you're going to make essentialist arguments about what women are naturally good at, why not stop at leadership? Why not also argue women are naturally good at domestic tasks? It's exposing the patronizing sexism underlying his position by extending it to an obviously ridiculous degree. Turner tried to recover by saying he's better at washing up than his wife, which is both irrelevant and kind of proves Julia's point that gender stereotypes don't map onto reality. Then he admitted, "I think it is a bit patronizing, and I don't mean it to sound like that, but what does it always have to be this man or that man?" That's interesting, because Turner is now conceding his argument was patronizing while still trying to maintain it's still valid. He's essentially saying, yes, I know this sounds sexist, but I'm still right that we need a woman leader. The question, what does it always have to be this man or that man, is attempting to shift to a representation argument, but it doesn't address the fundamental problem with his reasoning. Julia interjected with what might be the most important point of the entire exchange. She said the reason it's always this man or that man is because people don't care about that stuff. It's not relevant, so people get ahead based on their abilities rather than ticking boxes. That's the meritocratic argument, that the best person should get the job regardless of gender, and focusing on demographic characteristics rather than competence is counterproductive. Then Julia delivered her final blow, claiming the Labour Party doesn't have top-quality women candidates because they tick boxes, and it's a serious problem within the party. That's a provocative argument because it suggests Labour's approach to gender equality, which includes all-women shortlists and quotas, has actually harmed women by promoting them because it created a perception that they got positions due to their gender rather than ability. Whether you agree with that argument or not, it's a genuine critique of how Labour handles candidate selection and gender equality. The concern is that tokenistic approaches, where you promote someone primarily because of their demographic characteristics, undermines both the person being promoted and the broader goal of genuine equality based on merit. Turner's fundamental mistake was trying to argue for women in leadership based on gender stereotypes, rather than on either representation grounds or individual merit. If he'd said, Labour should have a woman leader because half the population is women and our leadership should reflect that, that's a defensible position about representation. If he'd said Angela Rader or Rachel Reeves should be leader because they're exceptionally talented politicians, that's an argument based on individual merit. But instead, he went with, women are naturally calm like my wife, which is patronizing nonsense that insults both women and the concept of judging people as individuals. The broader context here is that this interview happened during the Andy Burnham Civil War, when Labour is tearing itself apart over blocking a male candidate from standing. Turner's attempt to pivot to "we should have a woman leader" instead looks like changing the subject rather than addressing the actual controversy. And by basing his argument on stereotypes, he made himself look foolish and gave Julia an easy target. The exchange also highlights tensions within Labour about how to approach gender equality. There's a faction that believes in quotas, all-women shortlists, and actively promoting women to achieve parity. There's another faction that worries this approach is tokenistic and undermines the women it's supposed to help. Turner is clearly in the first camp, but articulated it terribly. Julia is representing the second camp, arguing that merit should be the only consideration. What makes this such compelling television is that it's an unscripted moment where an MP's attempt to sound progressive backfired spectacularly, and a skilled interviewer exploited that ruthlessly. Turner clearly thought saying he wanted a woman leader would make him sound modern and egalitarian. Instead, he revealed patronizing assumptions about gender that Julia tore apart in real time. The sodding patronizing line is going to be the clip that gets shared repeatedly, because it's Julia at her most direct and confrontational. She's not pretending to be polite or diplomatic. She's calling out what she sees as sexist nonsense and using strong language to emphasize how offensive she finds it. That's compelling television because it's genuine conflict and genuine disagreement rather than the usual political interview dance. For Turner, this is a genuinely embarrassing moment that will follow him around.
He went on television to defend his party and ended up being called patronizing for reducing women to stereotypes based on his marriage. That's not the kind of clip any politician wants circulating, but in the social media age, it absolutely will be. For Labour, it's another example of their MPs struggling to articulate coherent positions and getting destroyed in interviews. First, they've got the Andy Burnham Civil War. Now they've got MPs going on television and making patronizing arguments about gender that get torn apart by interviewers. None of this projects competence or coherence. If you want every moment of political interview carnage, every instance of MPs getting absolutely destroyed by skilled interviewers, every development in Labour's ongoing chaos, subscribe to UK Political Insight right now. We're covering all of it multiple times daily because British politics is serving up absolute gold constantly. Hit that notification bell so you never miss these moments. Drop a comment telling me whether you think Julia was right to call Turner patronizing, whether Labour's approach to gender equality is helping or